Kia ora, how's it going? Andre here again, and welcome back to Killa Drones. So today, what we're doing is we're looking at the Launch RC Vulcan, just the frame. I've been trying really hard to find all the good points and bad points about this frame for this review. And spoiler alert, I've got a problem. I can't find any bad points. Well, nothing bad about the frame, with some things that I've chosen that didn't quite work out that well. But I really like this frame. Really like this frame. I'm so impressed that I've set up a new giveaway over on killadrones.com. It's only $5 and you can win your own frame, and not a lot of tickets in it, so you've got a really high chance of getting your own Vulcan frame. Good luck, grab an entry fast. Alright, so let's put on the bench and have a look at the frame. Alrighty, so the frame is made by a bunch of Aussie guys. Now what's really impressive is that everything is designed by them. It's printed by them, the 3D prints are. They also have their own CNC machine, which they cut their carbon frames with. Nice! A big shout out to Sid. Man, your communication is really good. They only sell these frames through social media. I think through Facebook and Instagram. Man, that's such a modern idea. Alright, so back to the frame. Most things are positive, as I was saying. There are a couple of things that are neither here nor there, and I'll cover those a little bit later on. Alrighty, so let's start off with the carbon parts and work our way to have a look at the pod. So as you might have seen in the part 1 build video, the frame is made up of these 4 arms, 2 central pieces of carbon in this H format, and the top plate has press nuts which slot into the pod through here. So the screws go all the way through from the base to the top, and then the nut fixes them in quite securely there. In my opinion, that's a much smarter and better way of actually fixing the pod to the frame, rather than having the nuts actually held within the 3D part itself. So the carbon is all chamfered on the edges. They're really nice and smooth, and it really feels like a high quality finish and a real good attention to detail. One thing I like about the arms is that through here they're cut thin enough that if you're using the right props, the props will actually overhang the width of the frame itself. Now that's surely got to help with reducing a bit of prop wash. The one thing you'll need to remember though is that you've got to have narrow enough ESCs to sit on your arms so they don't overhang too much, or I guess you could do a 4-in-1 ESC inside the pod. There's plenty of room in there, so there's no reason why you couldn't. So the frame is made from 4mm thick carbon, and the tolerances are very good. So if you remember in the part 1 video, on 3 out of the 4 arms, the thickness was only 0.03 of a millimeter across it. And I think one of them was 0.09mm different, so that's less than 0.1mm difference from the inside through to the outside. Man, that's pretty nice. Now in terms of the motor protection, at first glance there wouldn't seem to be a lot of protection for it. And the option for some 3D printed motor protectors, which would actually be quite cool. But I was thinking about it, and if you actually have a crash, generally you'd be hitting here, and these little nubs would mean that the motor has a pretty low likelihood of getting smashed up with a frontal impact. The thing I also like about it is that there's some scallops put into the motor mounts here, and that's obviously to reduce a bit of weight. Pretty cool. So the frame once built is pretty stiff. As you can see, there's pretty much no flex in this thing at all. That should really help out with a nice rock solid flying experience. Alright, so moving on to the pod. This is the HD camera mount version of the pod. Actually, hold on a second. Where is that pod gone? Ah, here it is. So the difference is that this chunk of 3D printed material here slots on nicely from there, then your strap goes through there and then holds onto your camera sitting mounted on top of here. So it's all integrated, and it's an easy detachment for when you want to just have a sleek racing pod. So the pod itself, it's a really nice 3D print. It feels really solid. It can feel like it could take a really good beating, and it's well thought out. And man, doesn't it look super cool? It's almost stealth fighter-ish in its geometricness. Yeah, that's a weird word. All its geometric angles and stuff. I think it looks pretty mean. So let's go back into these pod locks here. So the pod locks on here really well with the frame. The press nuts slot in there perfectly. There's no slop whatsoever, and you get a really good fix on it once the nuts are screwed down. And the nuts don't actually need to be that tight really, because the print is just so good. Probably the number one I think I like about the pod is the camera protection. Just take the lens cap off here. For the Foxy Arrow 3, it feels like that there's no way let that focus. So if you look here, you cannot even see the lens, which means it's not going to smash in a crash, unless you're pretty unlucky. So even at different camera angles, there's still no protrusion coming out there. It's just another example of how well thought out this product is. It's those little details that are the things that you really look for in a new frame. So towards the back here you can see we've got a hole for the antenna to come out. I'm not actually using the hole right now, and that's because I had a bit of an issue with the first VTX that I put on. So I'm using an old one in here until I get a replacement. And unfortunately, the coax antenna that I'm using can't quite fit through the hole. No biggie. Wait till we get to a new VTX to get that set up properly. And with the receivers, or receiver, wait for the antenna to get out of the pod. Stop beeping here. And with the receiver integrated into the pod are these little tubes, which you can see the antennas can come out of quite easily. I've just got a couple of cable ties here, a heat shrink attached to the antenna, which works really well. And also these pods have these little slots on each side, as you can see here. And that's for access into the flight controller. So you can actually have your flight controller's USB port coming out left side or right side. That's really up to you. Now the one thing that I found, which is because of the components that I've chose, is that the latest Flip 32 Omnibus has its USB port offset slightly to the front, which means you cannot actually connect the USB when the pod's on. So to get around that, what I had to do, cut off the side of the USB plug to actually be able to slot that in there. And I got it to work, so that's pretty cool. I can live with that. But I guess if you're thinking about buying this frame, probably really think about what sort of flight controller you want to use, and just make sure that the USB port actually is mounted directly in the center of the board itself. Now one of the things you have to watch out for, and it's something that I've learnt while doing the build, is that the edge of the pods, edge of the pod I should say, can be quite sharp on the silicon wires. And I don't know if you probably can't quite see that there, but I've just done a quick and dirty liquid insulation repair on the positive wire going into the ESC. Maybe just a different wire route would help eliminate that, but it's just something to watch out for and keep an eye out once you've done your flights. Now one of the things I thought was a bit funny when I actually got the pod, I noticed some holes in the top of the pod here. I don't know if you can see those, hopefully you can. I contacted the Launch RC guys and was like, hey, I think there's a bit of a problem with the print. And I sent in a picture of these little holes here. And that's when I found out that they've actually designed it so that the VTX has some heat relief in the top. So I had a little laugh at myself about that. And at first I questioned whether it's actually necessary or not, because you do get quite a large amount of airflow coming through the camera front here and then out through the bottom of the pod. But then I thought about it, and I guess that's fine when you're flying around, but when you've got your cod just sitting here on the start line, or if you've had a crash early in a race and it's sitting on the field, then I guess it is a good idea to try and prevent the VTX and other components in the pod actually overheating. It's just another example about those little details that these guys have thought about. So obviously this isn't an El Cheapo frame, but in saying that, $103 delivered to my door, that's quite good money when you take into account the 3D pod that's been printed, the really high quality carbon, and all the design details that have gone into making the frame. And I think if you just want the pod that doesn't have the HD mount, so just for racing, then I think it's 80 something dollars Australian, with shipping on top of that I think. So in summary, the Launch RC Vulcan, the whole package is about 103 Australian dollars for the frame, obviously not as it's built here. The guys had a well-designed pod racing quadcopter. They CNC cut their own high-quality carbon parts, they print the pods, they do everything to have control of the product quality, so you get a really high-end product for what I think is a really reasonable price. Sure, you can buy a clone frame for next to nothing, and it'll be the same as everyone else's. But the Vulcan is really special, I reckon, and it's not in the realm of being over the top in price. Awesome job, Launch RC guys. Top marks. Until next time, bye! Okay, just one last point. I'd love to build this channel so I can do more drone builds and more reviews. So you can help me out by liking this video and subscribing to future videos too. And if you want to win this particular drone here, head over to killadrones.com to either enter the frame draw or the build as you see it here now. Cheers team, catch you later.